Hello everyone, President Martian here, coming at you with a new video. This time around we're going to be evaluating why the king pawn opening for white is not as good as you think in chess. I've been doing quite a little bit of research, and I found that the Sicilian defense is the best defense and for the king pawn opening for white, and this actually makes it so that king pawn opening, while it is one of the most commonly used openings, isn't really the best opening at all. So let's just go through this. So this is a standard form of Sicilian opening. First, here's your king pawn, and then you have the classic c5 by black. This is the beginning of the Sicilian, and even though there are a few variations, a lot of them lead up to this point. So, first thing we have here is white's knight going to f3, and this is just trying to prevent an attack by black with the pawns here. So black is going to protect the c5 pawn, and so that's what d6 is for. So next, what's going to happen is we're going to have the d pawn, the queenside pawn for white, move up to d4. And so what's going to happen here, and this is quite standard, is we're going to have the c pawn attack the d pawn here. And then, in order to keep things even, you're going to see the f knight rather attack the d pawn right there. So this is pretty standard again. And then black threatens the e4 pawn right there, and then white protects. It looks like white has a good setup here, and that is partially true because, as you could see, there are more developed pieces. White has 2 knights out, whereas black only has 1. And white's pawn is further up than black's. However, white is pretty much giving up center control here because black has a majority of pawns in the center. Black still has the 2 center pawns, whilst white gave it 1. So is remaining with 1. So in this variation here, what you're going to see is g6. This is the dragon variation. And what this is doing here is it's preparing for fianchetto of that black bishop. So you're eventually going to see bishop to g7. And one of the things that white can do against this is bishop e3. It's a pretty good defense. Brings out the bishop, protects the knight on d4, and it also threatens some squares. And then what's going to happen next is, like I said, we're going to see the fianchetto, which is the diagonal, the a1 to h8 diagonal, which is very strong. Anytime doing a fianchetto is very strong. And then the white's going to protect blocking knight going to g4 with f3. And then what's going to happen next is we're going to see a castling. Very standard. What's very interesting about this is, as you're going to see, we have counterplay on either side. So we're going to have black king side protection, and we're going to see white queen side. And this at least makes for a very interesting and complicated game, because you have one side that is going to try and push to queen side. So black is going to try, and the Sicilian is very known for this queen side counterplay. You see that there's a very open lane for black right here for queenside counterplay, eventually going up on this queenside castle right here. And then you see here, this is a pretty standard setup where the black bishop fianchettos, and then you have a nice strong base right here. So it's very strong for black at the very least. Even though it doesn't look like black has much control, it does set him up not only for defense, but for offense as well, because you're seeing here potentially, since there is a pawn majority on this side here, you can eventually line up for a pawn attack, and it can be very successful. But this iteration of the opening of the Sicilian defense is very strong. It's not the most commonly played, but it's one that I like to play, just because it leads for an interesting game where each player is going for the opposite side. It just leads to some very interesting lines. It's very complex, but something definitely to look at and be interested in. So here we have another variation called the Najdorf variation, and like I said, you're going to see the same standard setup here. But what happens next is this move right here. And this move is one of the most commonly played when seeing the Sicilian Defense, and the reason why this is good here is because it is preventing that right here. That would be a blunder, because you're going to see a pawn getting attacked here, and ultimately just the pawn is going to attack b5, because there's no need to move anything here. And then the knight, yeah, one of the knights will swoop in, but the reason why this is bad is because you're losing material. Black is going to gain 2 material, so that's why that is just not a good variation. Instead, as it suggests here, you're going to want to go for be3 instead. Or if anything, this is not a bad move either, because at least that is opening up the lanes for White's bishop. be2 is pretty safe, but this is also a very good move that you'll see a lot for White. It is generally regarded as one of the better defenses. Sometimes you might also see d3, but really this is probably one of the better ones. So you might see Black respond with e6, which is another good way to prevent the knight moving or even the pawn. It also declares a small center, because as you can see here, it has the pawn majority here. Like I said again, the essentials of the Sicilian defense means that Black is going to gain the pawn majority in the center, which is important. This can be a problem later on, but that's why the Black is going to most often castle kingside anyway, and that's why you're going to see White castling queenside more often than not. So again, like I said, this is a nice protective move right here. You might still see this. That's another thing that you can see. It's still keeping in with the lines. Again, preparing for the castle, that's necessary. And then you're going to see d2 at some point again. You can see this come out. This you don't really want to move here. Number one, you definitely don't want to move here anymore. So White's bishop is a little bit trapped here. So it might be suggested you might not want to play f3 here, and you might want to continue with something like that. So that is definitely possible. But ultimately, what you're going to see here, no matter which way you go about it. So let's say Black starts to bring the knight out, and then what you can see here is a queenside castle, pretty typical. Again, and then bishop will probably move to g7, and now we've got something of a game going on. And again, a lot of this is just leading to very complex lines. But as you can see here, Black is not just defending as you would see in any other opening. The Sicilian defense works in the sense that it can just not only create a nice defense where it's solid, getting the king to safety, which is typical of nearly all openings, but also creates setup for an attack as well. Because if you see this here, it's starting to get a little threatening here, and actually you could start to see a gain in material as well. If you follow through, for example, if maybe at some point the knight attacks this pawn here, of course there's a little trade-off here, but then you're starting to see something going on here. Again, White's in a pretty good situation here because this is a very strong response protecting this knight, and d2, of course, just is a very good move for the queen overall, not only for castling, but in terms of protecting certain pieces as well, is very strong. But that's why you're going to see that something like this is probably the best bet for White. But it all depends on how Black plays. Black definitely puts himself at an advantage here, at giving him a fighting chance. The statistics for the Sicilian defense against White as king pawn is so good that king pawn isn't actually considered the best move or the best opening, even though the majority of people play it. And there are several queen pawn openings that are much better than that, and sometimes even much more enjoyable and fun to play. So this next one is called the Queen's Gambit Accepted. And as you can imagine, the first move you see here is d4, which is the queen pawn opening. And this is very interesting. You don't really see this played much by black because it ends up in a loss. A gambit is where you risk one of your pawns, or you give up one of your pawns, which happens here. As we could see, d5, it's a pretty typical opening. And then c4, this is Queen's Gambit Accepted. And then what black is going to do is they're going to attack, right? So they give up a pawn. White gives up a pawn, right, on queen side. However, this can easily be taken back. And this is why you rarely see Queen's Gambit Accepted played, but it is something to note, right? So there, black defends and shields with the bishop, and then boom, queen takes again, and then you might see similar lines start to develop, like something like that probably, to get this line set up. And then you'll probably see something like this again. Things start to get quite normal after that. But the only risk in this, of course, is that the queen is exposed. More likely you're going to see Queen's Gambit decline and Queen's Gambit refused, which I'll cover in another video because they are complex in and of themselves. Another type you might see, there's different names for it, and it's a opening that I like to play a lot as white. Because it's much more intuitive in terms of where your pieces are supposed to go. And this is called the London system, or they have several different names for it. But essentially, this is a queen pawn opening. You'll often see d5 as the reaction to a queen pawn. Sometimes you'll see something more along these lines, which I believe would be called the Caro-Kann. The queen's pawn 1c6. You might see e6 as well. So maybe you'll see this. That's another one as well. So that's just all a way to kind of fight for the center. But you have the London system here. So what happens here is more often than not you're going to see d5, and then white's going to bring out bishop to bf4. Now my program calls it the Mason variation. But I've always learned this as the London system. It's very intuitive playing. So what might happen here is you'll probably see something like this. Your typical trying to threaten that pawn there. We'll see stuff like this start to crop up. And now the whole point here is you want to make sure that you get this bishop out before you close up. So maybe you'll see something like this involved, right? And then here's what happened here, is black just closed off their white bishop. Maybe you could see a fianchetto in the future, and that's probably what black might be doing here. But what you're going to end up happening here is, boom, now you have extra protection here. Your bishop is out to have some fun. It's not locked in. And you've just got a nice little line here. So that's a pretty solid opening. The game might follow, something along the lines. Black doesn't want to go out here, so you might see something like this. White continues to develop, and yeah. So maybe he does decide a fianchetto on this side. White is going to probably go out here because he wants to castle at some point. That's very important for him. And then black's going to go like this. We get the castle. We get the castle, right? And then the game is set up. So this white pawn has the ability to either move up and down, try and take control of the center, which is probably what might happen here, right? And there's really nothing you could do that black can do here because this pawn is stuck. And possibly he could threaten here, but then white can just move up, and then all of a sudden you've got a nice lockdown, because now that pawn might be in the position here to prevent this pawn from going up, either here or here, because of the en passant rule. Overall, as you can see, white is in a much better situation here than black. Black was immediately put on the defensive. There's many more options for white than black. And this is why queen's pawn opening in general might be better. And this opening in particular, like I said, I played it a lot, and it's because it's much more intuitive. Your pieces just seem like they naturally want to go there. Like for example, f6 here for this knight is a very natural spot. So that's why it's such a very good opening, and like I said, it's an opening that I play very frequently. And even though, you know, it because I played it a little bit more, it's probably gotten a little old to me, and I always look for new avenues to play and different openings. But I always come back to this one because it's a solid opening that I know that I can get a good start with. Um, and that's just something to be wary of. I'm no grandmaster, and I always constantly look for new ways to play the game, and just because I enjoy playing, and um, it's just a lot of fun for me. Um, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, please subscribe, and I'll be back for more videos. Thank you. Bye.